The filmmaker I am joined with today honestly needs no introduction. If there is anyone who has really brought spirituality, profound storytelling, societal dysfunctionality in his films and broken through the mainstream space, it is, of course, the one and only Imtiaz Ali, who I've been a huge fan of, and we've been lucky enough to do a podcast with him earlier, and now we get to speak with him about the re-release of Rockstar in the UK. So thank you so much, Imtiaz, for joining me on Filme Shilmy. It's great to have you.
Thank you, Anuj. It's great to talk to you again. And I like your shirt.
Oh, thank you. Wearing the brand. We're trying to do that. But wonderful. Well, look, Rockstar is often described as an experience more than a film. And I think with its re-release, Imtiaz, is this something you now see in the film, whether it's the craft itself of the film or the themes that it carries, that you perhaps did not fully realize when you first made it?
When I saw the film on its re-release in India just a couple of months back, I must say that that was the only time that I managed to see the whole film together in one piece.
Hmm.
Saw the film on its re-release, I thought that this is not the film I remember at all. It
Hmm.
was everything was new for me. And I just was I marveled at the fact that this film was even tolerated because it is so whimsical, it is so moody, it is just like it is following no pattern. It is there is no story structure or other things that you find in movies. This is just a very whimsical film. This is what I thought. And I realized that there is Ranbir's face, that Jordan, his face, his being, and then there is music. Those are the two things that just keep going through in the film.
Hmm. It's interesting you use the word whimsical because I feel Rockstar came at a time when you were breaking free from that typical commercial side of cinema, where this kind of, in a way, paved a new chapter for you, where profound storytelling became a lot more than prominent in your later works. So I think staggered is definitely the way to describe it because I remember watching it from the sort of small screen that you had in the beginning of the film to then when it suddenly becomes the full length of the screen. It was staggered. But then don't you also feel that staggeredness also maybe, indirectly actually represents the nature of Jordan's mindset and his life as well? So quite rightly so a mistaken masterpiece, perhaps on your end. Do you kind of like feel like that now?
Yeah, I can't say it's a masterpiece or not. That's for people to say. But I do feel that there is watching the film, and if you do feel like how Jordan feels, you do think like he thinks. He does not think in a structured way. Therefore, the film does not follow necessarily a given structure. He also wants to break the structure all the time, and the film also, therefore, manages to break a structure. I'll give you an example. There are many times in the songs of Rockstar that in the middle of a song, another song starts.
Hmm.
This is something which is musically like almost a mistake. You don't do this, but that happens in the middle of the Kun Faya Kun song. Song for no reason fades away, and there is the actual qawwali going on, which is also a song.
Hmm.
And then Kun Faya Kun returns. In the other song, which is Tum Ho,
Hmm.
Nadan Parinde stops, freezes for a moment, and then another song starts, which is Tum Ko. And then that goes on for some time, and then a third song starts, all within the span of a couple of minutes. So, it's just like, I don't know why, who did this, who decided to do this. It seemed like, yeah, but then the structure of his mind comes through.
Hmm. But spirituality has always lingered in your films. In fact, I remember when we did our podcast, you mentioned your inspiration, especially when it comes to musicalities, actually. For example, Tappas. You referenced this song, which I've been listening to ever since that interview back in 2019, by the way, is Maini Boldi, Humera Arshad's song, which honestly is, I can't see, like, for me now it's very Imtiaz Ali coded, even before he became a filmmaker. So it's very interesting how you've always been inspired by that. Like, and again, I think when it comes to the films, of course, through the Sufi influences, the Chali Kahani, the Tamasha stuff that you had there. So tell me about more. Like, do you feel like your own spiritual perspective has evolved through the stories you've told over time as well?
I'm not conscious of a spiritual perspective that I might possess. I don't think about it, but I get attracted to things and then I enjoy them and I feel that they maybe are of a certain type. Um, but I have learned a lot through filmmaking, through writing, through trying to look at life through various characters. And that has been very enriching for me personally. If only what my films preach, I could practice personally, it would be very nice.
Sure. Have you, how difficult is it? I mean, have you ever tried to maybe adhere to what the ideals or the value systems when it comes to the spiritual aspects of the films showcase? How difficult has it been for you? I mean, have you endeavored to try to live by those ideals of the films as well?
Well, no, not really. I think the ideals that get reflected in the film are things that I might or might not personally even believe in, but I'm definitely intrigued by them. I'm definitely uh, kind of examining them when I'm making a film or when any character of mine is seen doing it. Well, I don't know whether I do it in personal life. It's not as though I've seen that there is a movie of mine or worked in a movie and adopted consciously something in my life. But these things also might happen subconsciously.
Hmm. Imtiaz, it's very interesting because I've been thinking very deeply about your films, and when I watched Rockstar back then, for me, one of the earliest references, and not because Rahman Sir was also part of the
Yeah.
music, but I just think the fact that Dil Se, Mani Ratnam's Dil Se, which is based on the Seven Shades of Love from Arabic literature, there's such a strong Mani Ratnam influence in your films that I find, and I don't know if this is something that's you drawn inspiration from, but I think the way you showcase love, spirituality, profoundness, social dysfunctionality, all of these aspects, is just so poetic with the way you represent it and the way he has also represented it in his films. So, who would you say is your biggest inspiration actually, as a filmmaker?
Mani Ratnam is a huge influence on me. I admire his movies, have always admired his movies. When I saw the first Mani Ratnam film of my life, I was in school, I guess, or in college. It was Gitanjali. It was a Telugu film. I didn't know the language, but I enjoyed it and watched it 17 times. And so the story goes without subtitles. So I've been following Mani Ratnam, and if there's any influence of his in my life, then it's to the advantage of me.
Hmm.
And I had a chat with him some like last year for Mami, and I got the chance to interview him and ask all the personal questions or the
Oh,
questions which I wanted to ask about his filmmaking. So a long session and a very fruitful one. And so he's an influence, but I think other influences as far as film directors are concerned are people like, you know, like in the Indian perspective, I think Shyam Benegal has been a big influence on me because I've seen all his films while I was growing up, and I was very intrigued by how he could hold my attention with common characters, with people that looked like real people and
hmm.
not people on a film set. And I was very fascinated by that. It was also very juicy. His narrative was also always very juicy. So Shyam Benegal, I'm a big admirer of Bimal Roy in cinema.
Hmm.
Old director Bimal Roy. His movies, I think he would be the single most like respected director as far as I'm concerned, Bimal Roy. And Vijay Anand was a director. Raj Kapoor is a director. These are the people that I hope have influenced me.
But I think what I've also really loved is this dysfunctionality of society. For me, one of my key highlights from an Imtiaz Ali film will, of course, be the monologues that we have in Rockstar, and also the scenes between Nargis and Ranbir. I mean, incredible, which I will go into. But it's also in Love Article, the Saif Ali Khan one, where just before Deepika's getting married, he has that question, "Are you married, Mira?" The entire scene, भाई कितना मैं रोया हूँ उस सीन को देख के, मतलब मैं ही बता सकता हूँ, because it was, you know,
क्यों, क्या हो गया था आपकी जिंदगी में?
no, it's just because it touches on that loss of innocence, that you know masti masti mein wo breakup celebrate kar rahe hain, and then he's like realizing that shit has hit the fan. Apologies for my French, but it was just so it was just so hard hitting. And I think when it comes to that, I think it's I love the way you've done that, but you've changed that a little bit, I think, with Amar Singh Chamkila recently, because your protagonists often rebel against societal structures in pursuit of self-identity, but in that film the conflict almost feels reversed, and it's almost like an, I won't say an antithesis to Rockstar, but it was kind of opposite to what Rockstar sort of talks about.
Yeah.
So what led you to kind of this shift from Rockstar to maybe, let's say, Chamkila, in terms of this perspective in your storytelling?
I get excited by the fact that a new film of mine can have a very different perspective from a previous film. That's when it starts to excite me. That's the reason I would want to make another film if the perspective is different, because then I will be at the deep end of the pool. Then I'd have to, struggle to stay afloat and then swim. And in all of this churning, something good can be created. Something that already is known is something that exists and cannot therefore be created. I feel that I like the two examples you've taken, that of Chamkila and Rockstar first. Chamkila's situation and his mentality was very different from that of Jordan.
Hmm.
And as a filmmaker, the ability to follow both is precious to me. You know, that also makes the films look different, while there would be the common connection of music and popularity, and the connection, or the I feel that Chamkila, more than even Rockstar, is a love story between the artist and his art,
Hmm.
where he doesn't even care for his own ego or anything. He just wants to perform.
Hmm. And I think, I find it really interesting because I think when Rockstar was in the headlines, I remember back then, and there was so much excitement and ambiguity as well about the project, because obviously this was like your next big film after Love Ajkal, the Saif Ali Khan film, of course. And I think there was so much talks about the casting of the film. I think even now people still, like, I was reading up on the IMDb page of Rockstar and the trivia, and the amount of casting like selections that you had is actually very interesting, because I just felt like, imagine if you had actually gone with that decision, how would it have panned out? Like, I'll be honest, Imtiaz, like Nargis is her performance, it was divisive when it released, right? There were people who were
Yeah,
criticizing
sure.
it, saying she was wooden, she was this. But now it's almost reached a cult status. I think people kind of now warm up to Heat Call in a very different way.
That's
Now,
true.
now that you've learned and you've understood back then and now, how do you define that decision of casting her as Heer? And if you had the chance to go back in time, would you have reversed it, knowing what you know now?
I think I would need the performance, the innocence, and the heart of Nargis for Heer anyway. I wanted the doing of this role to not be a race. I wanted it to be a truthful experience, 100%. And Nargis gave that. She is an American girl. She's lived all her life in New York. She has a body language and an accent. And we could not really take that out of her while in performance. Over a period of time, one gets used to it, and we I, as director, must have stopped seeing it, but when people saw it, it threw them off, like it had thrown me off initially. But now, if you notice, in the re-release, there's not one comment which that is against the way Nargis is. I think people have also accepted her with the same amount of love that I accepted her and cast her. No, so I wouldn't have changed the casting. I'm very happy with the way, uh, uh, there's a truthfulness in which she has done it. She might be an American girl. Well, so that's a casting error for sure.
Mm.
But but she's truthful. Her heart is there. You see any shot of Or Ho, that song, which is that terrible song which has this deep, almost a sinful rhythm.
Mm.
You see how she is. To give yourself like that to a role was important.
But I think you've always had this sort of songs, though, I think, when it comes to your female characters, where it's almost like celebrating their liberating life, or their beautiful emotions of discovery about themselves. Like you've got Katya Karu in Rockstar, obviously Ye Ishq Hai in Jab We Met, of course, and then you had, I think even recently, Tu Kya Jane from Amar Singh Chamkila, which I've not been able to stop listening ever since it's come out. Highway Pataka Guddi. So there's, I think, even in the way you've represented the female characters as well, there's also a sense of where it's almost gray at the same time, and it's not trying to paint them as a heroine, but it's also allowing them to celebrate that life, that's essence of what life really is. So if you could talk about that aspect, because I feel like we don't really talk about the way you've represented female characters enough in your movies, and I think it would be
I'm
nice.
glad, I'm glad you mentioned that. And again, most of the things that one does, most of the decisions that I take in filmmaking are instinctive and not conscious, you know. However, when I see myself on the set shooting, let's say, Tu Kya Jane or a Katya Karu, or there are various other songs or bits in films, I feel there is a certain joy in me, and I because there is also a sense of frustration or a sense of complaint that I might have with society, which has, in my view, treated women unequally for centuries. It continues even now. And even when you say that you judge them, that are they heroic, you're using a phrase which is a masculine phrase. So to be, I enjoy women that are judged wrong. You know, I enjoy women that are supposed to be not high on the moral or the ethical scale. Because why do they have to pertain to the laws of a society which in any case is highly male focused?
Hmm.
So when they sin, it's also some sort of a liberation. So I think that I enjoy that feeling. You know, I feel that as much as I can enjoy my freedom, can she? And when she threatens to, that's something that I enjoy in cinema.
And I'm gonna also very subtly chime in Veronica here from Cocktail, because honestly, Imtiaz, I have been able to relate with Veronica on so many levels. For me, she's literally my soul sister. I literally call her my soul sister because I've been through a lot of things she's gone through. And it's interesting that we were talking about songs which are by females that talk about female lives, but I think in Cocktail, you've got songs, I think, which actually really define her. I mean, of course, you had Angreji Beat, which was her entry song, but you also had Tera Naam Japdi Phira, you know, which again was sung by a male, but it also kind of re-emphasized her emotions, which I think was a very interesting take on the dichotomy aspect. So even when you're writing a piece of cinema or a piece of character, how much of an input do you actually have on the final product, especially in Cocktail? Because I don't think we've actually celebrated Veronica enough, and how that was such a strong character, and we've not. I mean, I think she deserved her own film, to be very honest, because of how strong she was. So I'd love to know a bit of your insights on that.
Yeah, Veronica um, was a very interesting character, I felt, because she was challenging the mores of herself even, and the fact that somebody can transform to a certain extent to want to get what they want, or get what they like. But I feel that what I like about Veronica's character is that she has lived a certain life and she is guided by her emotion. She's not guided by a sense of either ego or morality. She very easily would give it all up. She is not ideologically standing on any position. That's interesting about her because she tries to fit in. She tries to go against her grain. You feel bad for her because this is not a girl that has ideologically chosen to be a certain way. She's just born into that life. So I feel that things like judgment can be suspended when you're looking at the emotion of a character who's seeking something. I think Veronica, therefore, achieves a lot. And also, it's the performance and the direction, which is not mine in this case,
Okay.
and the choice of songs and everything else, which contributed to her turning out to be the way she did. I remember Deepika read the film. I think uh, the other role was offered to her first, Mira.
Yeah. Hmm.
And then she called me and said, I've read this, but what do you have to say? I said, okay, so this is maybe a bit like what you've done before. It's even called Mira.
Mhm.
She just finished Love Ajkal with me. And then I said, why don't you read the whole script again and this time read for Veronica? And then she called back to say, yes, this is what I want to do.
Hmm.
And it is a lot owing to her and the way she exploded. I think it also um, was one of the finest performances where she discovered her potential. I think Deepika discovered her potential in that role.
She was mind blowing. Honestly, I don't think anyone could do that role the way she did it. And I think it's one of my favorite. And that's when I fell in love with Deepika actually as an actress, and she was exceptional in that film. I'm gonna bring it back to Rockstar again. And it's interesting you mentioned Raj Kapoor. But actually, if there is, I mean, you've worked with two Kapoors, like two brilliant Kapoors, of course. Now, I mean, of course, Bebo. I mean, three, Bebo, and obviously Shammi Kapoor. Oh, well, four. Exactly. Rishi Kapoor as well. My goodness, I've lost count. All right, so it's pretty amazing in Rockstar. You obviously had Shammi Kapoor ji there, and the way you showed and referenced Kashmir ki Kali as well, in that whole Shikara wala scene, and you've also had Shammi Kapoor ji in, which was his last screen presence. I think this is also one of the rare films which actually showcases a Kashmiri Pandit wedding, because until
Yeah.
then, we had not seen a representation of that
I'm
sort.
so glad you mentioned that.
So, because again, when you were talking about the representation of women and the sort of finding the stuff that are almost marginalized and marginalized voices, as you have with Highway as well, how, I mean, even though it was a very subtle thing, but how important was that representation for you? And secondly, um, Shamiji's last screen role, and I think it was so beautiful to see the only time when him and Ranbir are together, especially in the whole dichotomy of Fame Wala sequence. Um, do you kind of now feel like, oh, I wish I kind of had more scenes with them two together? Do you ever have that regret within you as a filmmaker?
So, no, I don't have that regret because I feel that the balance was totally right. And I knew the kind of physical pain Shamiji was going through to come to set and perform each scene.
Wow.
Yeah, he was going through a lot of pain. And I don't want to get into how painful it was for him to actually, uh, just like exist at that point of time, honestly. And it is his blessing that he was in the film and he gave it everything. You can't, I'll tell you an example. There was a shot where he's supposed to say something, and he said it well, but on his face there was pain. And I knew that he's just coming from the hospital and he's in so much pain.
Mm,
But the shot was not okay for me as a director because there was pain on his face, which was not supposed to be there. Right.
mm,
Imagine that I went and told him because I thought that this is not the actor that one says, "हाँ बहुत अच्छा था शम्मी जी." It's a lie. You know, and I went and told him, "Shammi ji, this is a very good take, but there is pain on your face. I can go with this take." And he just looked down and he said, "Okay, let's do one more." And then he just gave himself 30 seconds to just take the pain out of his face and then take the shot. People don't realize what actors put in for the life that they live and the work that they do.
Hmm.
And so it was a blessing on his side, and I feel the balance is totally right. I'm very happy that there are those scenes and those only between Ranbir and Shammi. Coming back to your first question, which is about Kashmiri Pandit wedding in Rockstar, it's something very special to me. And I would like to mention a gentleman called Professor Ganju, who passed away recently, who lived in uh, the old town, Srinagar, and I visited him, and he's the gentleman who told me about the Kashmiri culture, and specifically about the Pandit culture in Kashmir, and also about the entire influence of the West, which is Shah Hamdan coming in and all of that, the way that things changed and how faiths intermingled and all of that, but specifically about the Kashmiri Pandit culture, the traditions of wedding, the traditions of food and music and symbolism. And if you see, like, the few shots that we have of Kashmiri wedding in Rockstar are specific and emblematic almost, because this whole process of an umbrella with which the father of the bride welcomes the groom, the little design of a peacock or a bird on the floor,
Hmm.
these are very symbolic things to a Kashmiri wedding.
Hmm. It was very beautiful, and I think it was a really nice little subtle homage to Kashmir Ki Kali, and it almost felt like if the experienced version of Shammi Kapoor, was almost giving advice to the younger generation. It almost felt like that sort of a vibe going, and I only realized that when I saw the dichotomy of fame scene, and it was really beautiful. But I think Ranbir ki pata hai kyun bhi kya hai, and I think one thing that I've always said to him in interviews is that his the sense of duality, like these dual personalities in his characters, of the person he wants to be, but the person he then eventually becomes, and that fight for identity, of self identity, which I think kind of, in a way, began with Rockstar as well. You've always had this whole trope actually, and I think even if we look at Ranbir's filmography and now Animal, when he literally plays a character which is so deliciously to examine and to analyze, it's very interesting to see that evolution from Jordan to now, an Animal. But I think for you, because obviously it was a self-destructive character, let's be honest, and there were times when one, if they look at a certain lens, it might be kind of questionable. People might have questions for it. But at the
Yeah.
same time, I think the way you balanced it as a filmmaker was very subtle. So how did you ensure that it did not ever become a thing where it's almost, I don't want to use the word glorify, but romanticizes the idea of self-destruction in a way, rather than, and you made it into more of a spiritual experience. So how did you manage that tone of voice, I think, as a filmmaker when it comes to that theme?
I didn't really think of it that way at all. I was just trying to imagine this character. I was just trying to feel more and more like he felt, and be guided by his ambition, which or the lack of it. I was not thinking of him making an impression on the audience and whether the audience will like him or judge him. Um, but one thing started emerging while I was even making it, that there was a certain relatability that one could feel towards this guy. And I feel that people that watch films and like characters in them, they don't put them on a judgment scale, really. They don't necessarily like the most moralistic or ethical or the good character, you know. That's the thing of the past. I think always, in fact, people have liked relatable characters. Many roles that Raj Kapoor played, for instance, were not all white. Many roles that many people played, like Amitabh Bachchan played,
Mm.
were not, were full of gray. In fact, many roles that even people like, actresses like Parveen Babi playing a role in Diwar. You can judge her all you want, but you still love her.
Mm.
You still love Amitabh Bachchan in Diwar. So I feel that it's the same thing with Jordan. If people like Jordan, it's not because he scores high on the moral report card at all.
Yeah.
Sometimes I feel people can see their own frailties in the characters in film, and then that's when they relate to them the most.
And it must be very challenging though for you as a filmmaker, though, especially in today's day and age, because I feel there's wokeness and there's pseudo wokeness, and it's completely gone off the scales. तो आजकल अगर आप एक film बनाते हो, and people are literally talking about old films that we've loved, and they're like saying, "अरे but ये toxic था, ये वो." I mean, which honestly, yes, it makes sense in today's discourse, but we loved that as an emotion, and I think people should leave it aside and just leave it as a work of fiction. You
Yeah,
know,
see, I have something to say on this actually.
please.
Just as a human being who's been around in this world for 50 years now, 5 decades I've seen, right? So I have seen moralities, ethics, and even the code of conduct, even the constitution, sorry, not the constitution, but the Indian Penal Code change.
Hmm.
I've seen the mores of society change. I have seen what people said about homosexuals 30 years back to what they say about them now, about women 20 years back to what they say about women now, or even marriage. And all of these things undergo change, right? But there is a certain truthfulness which is always appreciated.
Hmm.
And that truthfulness is the truthfulness with which I can work on my characters. I have to know whether I'm trying to piss a certain community off. I have to know that I do not have the intention of doing so.
Hmm.
Nobody, I think, there'd still be some factions that will try to exploit. And I might make a mistake and actually rub somebody off the wrong way. But the chance of that is diminished by the fact that I don't have the intent to do that.
Hmm. Hmm.
So I feel while everything changes, and of course, then somebody will say that a lot of things that we've shown and glorified in cinema of the past today will fall under some category of being obsessive or what's it called when you actually start to follow somebody too much, stalk them.
Stock. Hmm.
Lot of things that used to happen in cinema of the 80s is like hardcore stalking, man,
Yeah.
nowadays.
True.
Things change, but there was an honesty there. So for that time, it was appreciated.
Hmm.
And there's honesty now in which can be appreciated.
Very, very true. And I'm glad you talked about change. And I think you've actually worked with actors at a very transformative phase in their careers, giving them roles that define their image. Um, I think after Love Ajkal, though, the Karthik and Sarah film, did your understanding of casting change? I mean, what do you kind of look now in actors beyond their technical abilities? And do you kind of also now feel, I mean, what I felt actually, I'm going to express my opinion here, Imtiaz, if
Please,
I may.
please, please.
Is that I feel like the actors that you have, or that I think that really do a good job in your films, they have to be in line with your vision as a filmmaker. And if they're just trying to do it just to score brownie points or just to show that अरे हम कितने बड़े अच्छे actors हैं वैसा वाला vibe, I just feel like it never works out. So for you, how important uh is that sort of a vision for you in terms of choosing those actors? And in today's day and age of the new fresh talents that are being launched, who would you say is our actors? I mean, you worked with Avinash and Tripti already in Leila Majnu, who were outstanding, but who else would you say are actors that you're really, really keen on sort of working with and that have that same value system as you as a director?
So firstly, I appreciate you saying that, and I'll keep that in mind. I have been told that I should, work with actors that I can have a, better like a working rapport with, in terms of the dedication, maybe, and also to be in sync in that way, or like emotionally to be in sync with character is important. And there are so many actors that are very, very good. And there are many, many actors. See, unfortunately for me, I get excited to work with an actor if they fit that role. The suitability to a role is what excites me towards an actor. It's not a neutral body. We know, like, I know everybody. We keep meeting, and per se, I'd like to work with all of them. But anybody that suits the characters that I'm writing is the one that I'd like to work with. However, I would like to say to all of us, this whole community of writers, directors, actors, cinematographers, makeup people, this creative community that makes the film industry, that all of us should basically focus on the art that we are creating, on the stories that we are telling, and the emotion that we are going through while doing that. There's a sanctity to it, you know, and we should desist the temptation of being too much of a trade analyst,
Hmm.
talk and see everything in the measure of what it might achieve in the short end. Because the large movements that will ultimately define success cannot be schemed so easily.
Hmm.
It requires a certain sense of surrender and dedication. And that is what marks a better performance from a not so good one.
Honestly, I'm just gonna name a few people who I really love. Okay, just gonna throw it out there because I would love to see Sharvari and Kriti Sanon work in your films as actresses. I think they would be incredible. I think the depth they have as actresses,
Love.
marvelous. I would love to see them explore your world or cinema. And I think it's interesting because like in Tamasha or even like in Jordan's life, where it's that whole conflict, internal conflict that he has. But I think the representation of a clown and robot that you have in Tamasha as a motif is very much the struggle of life. And I think if anything is to go by, your films rarely follow structured narratives. They kind of unfold more like lived experiences. And I think in an industry where commercial storytelling has become extremely redundant, like in a sense, when I say redundant, in a sense where people are not understanding where society is leading to and just doing the copy paste of our format. Do you ever feel the need to kind of strike a balance between intuitive storytelling as well as the structured narratives that may or may not work?
I've always tried to make that balance, and I have usually failed. And I've just gone intuitively into the flow that my films become, which is what I was kind of almost shocked to see in the Rockstar re-release. Um, I tend to be more intuitive, and I feel that um, a little bit of breaking the structure is important, especially at this time, because the viewer does not want to see anything that is not genuine to you. They don't want to see structure. They've seen structure. I think suddenly, due to COVID, there's a certain um, kind of evolution of the audience, if I may. They have really evolved, and now they want to see finer things. They want to see more specific things. Why should I talk to you particularly? Or why should I watch, I mean, your film?
Hmm.
There has to be something of you in it, not something that you're borrowing, even if it's a structure.
Hmm. And I think it's interesting because I think Highway was actually a very good example, I think, in your filmography that really does that. Because obviously, I mean, of course, Randeep was a well-known name, and Alia was just fresh off the boat back then, obviously, as an actor. And what a great job she did. Honestly, she was outstanding in the film. But again, it kind of strived to get that balance. I mean, even if we look at a lot of your movies, even Rockstar to a major extent as well, of course, it had the commercial dressing, but it was still quite not typically commercial, right? So, has the commercial successes or failures ever bothered you, Imtiaz? Because I know ultimately it is a business, right? We all have to remember that it is a business. You're
Yeah,
there
yeah,
to
of
make money.
course. Okay. So I think I won't say that success and failure are the same things. Of course, everybody tries for success, and so do I. And failure is not something that I'm quoting, and I hope I never get it. However, there are things that failure teaches you, which success cannot, and vice versa. And I think the more important lessons are learned during failure. One of them is to actually recognize it when it happens, because there is so much noise and there is so much partiality that is being imposed upon us because of social media and the way it functions, that it's very difficult to even see the real picture. If I want to delude myself, it's so easy now. So I feel so to be able to see failure is a very successful thing to do.
Ah, okay.
And I think not that anybody is happy when the movie doesn't do very well. And the commercial aspect of filmmaking is extremely important, because if you give the money back to the people you borrow them from, then you can take more money to make the next film. To that extent, commerciality of a film is extremely important. The other reason why commerciality is important, that it is linked to popularity. And I think many filmmakers like myself are making movies so that, we also entertain people.
Hmm.
So it becomes a measure of that.
And I think because the industry is going through this transition period now, I think these re-releases are helping to kind of bring back that joy of cinema of what we once loved, comforting by nostalgia as well, you know?
Also, I feel that re-releases are establishing a very important rule of cinema, that it is permanent. Film is permanent, and it can be best enjoyed on the big screen, and they can come back to the big screen again and again. And any movie that is popular, any movie that is demanded, can come back. I think this power will come to the people to demand the films they want to watch in the way they want to watch. If they want to watch it on the big screen, film producers and exhibitors will bring it to them.
Hmm. For sure.
So I think this is a brilliant move to re-release films. Many of them are going on right now, and it can become a feature of our lives, that a movie can be re-released. So it's not going to be that, oh, if it does not do the first rung, if it does not do the opening weekend, which opening weekend is highly placed on how much money and how much publicity I'm doing. So a certain type of film has a better chance of succeeding. A
Yeah.
certain value of film has a better chance of succeeding. But in this way, any film can succeed if one knows that, this has permanent shelf life, bro. So you
Hmm.
have to make it forever.
It
That's, I think, a good thing for filmmaking.
definitely extend the shelf life. Right, final question, because I know you have to rush. You have your own genre, I think rightly said, in Indian cinema. And you've definitely pushed beyond your comfort zone. But I think it will be really interesting to maybe see the drawing room now, actually, for you, after doing such intense stories like Rockstar. I mean, what do you think would really push your boundaries or challenge you as a filmmaker? Because it can be so easy for a creative to become a prisoner of their own craft, you know?
Yeah, I'm constantly aware of that, and I also try to do things to break out of um, anything that becomes a craft.
Mm,
Uh, and I feel I don't move with challenge. I think I move with love for a certain story, a desire to be in a certain world, and be with certain characters. And that's why I get into making a movie. And but every time there are some new challenges there. If you try to do it truthfully,
mm,
then there are new challenges, things you've not done before. Nothing, no, like the thing about filmmaking is that no set is the same, no moment is the same, no work that you are doing at any point of time is something that you've done before.
mm,
Everything is new. So you are always facing a challenge, because you really don't know. I've done 9 films now, but when I go to a film set, I still feel like, what the hell am I going to do today? Because I really don't know what to do.
mm,
It's not only me, everybody would feel this.
mm.
So this newness always keeps us on our toes as well. And every day, everything is challenging, I feel, for us.
Is there anything in particular that you want to explore though? Because it's such a, I mean, after doing Chamkila, I'd love to see you do more historical stuff because it was so beautiful the way you created that atmosphere. It actually felt like I was back in the 80s. So what sort of a world are you keen on exploring, especially?
I like worlds that are um, you know what I liked in Chamkila, the fact that it was very earthy. It took me to earth. It
Yeah.
took me to the basics of how life is or even was in India, back in the rural section, which is being a bit forgotten. I'd like to go to those areas which cinema doesn't go, whether it is emotionally or even geographically, and like so that's interesting for me. I don't know whether you can call it a challenge, but it's interesting for me to go to certain like rural sections of
Hmm.
society, see what happens there, people or places that movies are not being made for.
On a parting note, I'm gonna feed you some ideas. I would
Yeah.
to see a film based on Mirabai. Okay, an actual historical film, not necessarily a magnum opus, but a spiritual retelling of Mirabai and the Saint Kabir. Because I have never, I mean, Mirabai की story आई थी हेमा मालिनी जी के साथ बहुत बढ़िया film थी वो, but it'll be nice to see a modern retelling of that and for Kabir because I've
I
listened
would
to his
love to make, yeah, I would love to make a film or a story on Kabir for sure, and Mirabai. And the only thing is that one has to make it truthfully, and these are characters that have said controversial things. They have faced controversies in their lives.
Hmm.
You- And so when you make a truthful movie about them, you can also come under attack.
Yeah, but it's more about the spirituality aspect, which you've always had in your films, which you could,
Spirituality, but the spirituality in itself can, like, if somebody wants, create a conflict.
yeah, true. It
But
can.
I understand and I appreciate your comments.
No, definitely. But look, oh, Imtiaz, thank you so much. I think you've given me, I felt like the younger self of me is so happy today because I've had such a beautiful chat with one of my favorite filmmakers of all time. And I think this entire discussion has been so beautiful. And I think with the re-release of Rockstar, I think it's going to evoke a lot of beautiful conversations. I think that was there back then and even new ones now. So thank you so much. And I cannot wait to catch the beautiful musical Odyssey once again in the cinema. So thank you so much for joining me. It's been such a pleasure to have you.
Thanks, Anuj, and thanks for actually remembering me and reaching out for this interview.
Thank you. No,
And the moment you sent me that message, I knew that I'd be speaking to you, and I was really looking forward to you.
honestly, God just aligned it. God made it happen. Seriously. And I really cannot thank God enough for making such things happen. And can't wait. Really, I cannot wait to watch it again. So thank you so much, Imtiaz, and wishing
Thank
you
you.
the very best for the film and, of course, upcoming releases as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Anuj. Bye.
Thank you.